Our culture is immersed in relativism. What is relativism? And can you discern it? We'll explore this and more on this edition of Life Matters. Brian Johnston is the Western Director of the National Right to Life Committee. He has served in many capacities while advocating for innocent lives, as California Commissioner on Aging, as Chairman of the California Pro-Life Council, on the board of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled. And now here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Well, welcome back to Life Matters, your program on the right to life, on the culture that's emanated from that singular foundational idea that each and every individual has been given a gift, the right to be alive, given that gift by a creator, and that the government has a duty to protect that right to be alive. Now, that's America's founding fathers that wrote that out. You know that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, endowed by their creator with this right and other inalienable rights that emanate from their life. So the right to life is a really important premise. It says that every individual is unique. Today, we're going to spend time going a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about natural law. Now, we've talked about natural law in other programs. Several months ago, we had an extensive discussion about why natural law is a necessary predicate in your understanding. Not just America's founders, not just attorneys and legal pros, not just philosophers, but knowing that natural law is a premise on which to base our understanding of other things is essential if you're going to have a happy life. Believe it or not, we're going to talk about that. I want to thank Karen Klinger, who's mentioned that and how much she appreciated those discussions, and also Fletcher Briggs. So thank you guys. And yes, we're going to talk about it now because we're all preparing to vote. And when you go to vote, you're actually making a determination based on who is the best person to represent your desires for what a just law is. And in some cases, like in California, where we have direct democracy and the fall ballot, we're going to have propositions where literally the voters themselves are now lawmakers. You actually get to create laws in California, and there's quite a few ballot propositions. That means you need to understand what is the basis for a just law. We're going to walk through this. Don't let your eyes glaze over. It's actually a lot easier than you may think if you're willing. And I'll be honest with you, whenever you have any discussion, there's a lot of people say, no, I don't think so. And they say, I don't believe that. And there's a certain point where that's their decision. Every one of us can believe what we decide to believe, but that doesn't make our opinion what's really true. And if I know I've had to examine my own opinions and my own understanding when I've been confronted with objective facts that go against my inclinations, my opinions. And what we don't want to do as advocates for life, as defenders of innocent life, is make this merely about our opinions. It's not my mere opinion that abortion is killing a unique individual. That's a unique human individual. And in California, you can kill that baby through all 9 months of pregnancy. And most people, when they see these facts, they get very uncomfortable with protecting and vaunting and celebrating choice abortion. So we have to make sure they still may not agree because they're more committed to their opinion and their ideology. But it isn't that they're disagreeing with my opinion. It's our job to show that, no, they're disagreeing with objective facts. So in Life Matters, we like to dig into the right to life as a principle and then with the objective facts that are connected with that. In today's program, we're going to have some interesting comments from Martin Luther King, not simply on his work, which was an important work in the United States of fighting segregation. We'll talk about Martin Luther King. By the way, Martin Luther King was a Republican, an important principle. And we'll talk about why he was a Republican and why during his era, a lot of folks who were black were in fact Republicans. You may not know that, but he was a leading Republican. And if you go back to some of the you'll see that there were quite a few notable Republicans of that day in the 60s. I'm thinking of, in particular, Charlton Heston, who actually walked with Martin Luther King and that it was really the Republican Party that led not only to the end of slavery, as you know, that Abraham Lincoln was the first elected Republican president. The basis for the Republican Party was to bring an end to slavery, an essential element of Republican principles. And there's a reason that the Democrat Party didn't quite get there. And we'll talk a little bit about the contrast between the Democrat Party ideology and the Republican Party ideology, their methods. But we're going to let Martin Luther King address it, and specifically to address natural law. He wrote about natural law, and we're going to share about his analysis of natural law and how to find just laws, because you have to have some method of determining more than your opinion. Most people are quite content to give their opinion. Oh, I believe this or I believe that. And you believe that? That's fine. You're entitled to what you believe, but I'm going to believe what I believe. This isn't about our beliefs. And if you listen to Life Matters, we go to pains to explain this is not about our particular faiths. If you make this about your religious doctrine, then you're actually losing the larger argument, the larger understanding of this battle for just laws. We're going to talk about a friend of mine, a recent friend of mine in Egypt. His name is Hani, and I just visited with him 2 days ago, and it was as if I was visiting with you. He was on Zoom, and I spent about 2 hours with Hani, and we talked about the right to life. He's a great guy. I don't speak Arabic. I don't have any Egyptian roots, but I have him as a friend, and I'll get into that more. And I got to explain to him what the right to life is and about the principle of natural law. It was a great visit. So I'll tell you about Hani. By the way, we have our program now broadcast on European Gospel Radio shortwave, and you can hear Life Matters Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time on European Gospel Radio, which is actually heard in North Africa. It's heard in the Middle East and, of course, in large chunks of the European continent. That's European Gospel Radio, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. European Central Time. But then we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to talk about the idea of voting biblically. And it's a phrase I've heard a lot. I'm not opposed to it, but I am very concerned that not many folks fully understand its depth and meaning. So we're going to spend some time about Christian folks of all denominations who want to vote biblically. What does that really mean? Is there really some problems if we don't dig into the facts about what it means? And we'll spend time with that. And seeing as we are heard on a lot of Christian stations, we're on conservative talk stations, Christian stations, and the podcast, we're going to spend some time addressing my fellow Christians on the thorough meaning of Scripture and applying it to just laws right now. How do we do that? So it's going to be a fun program. When we come back, we'll start digging in depth on what is natural law. You know, there is no right to life if there is no natural law. That's plain and simple. If you believe in the right to life, you have to believe in, and I'm saying you have to understand what natural law really is. We're going to talk about that coming up.
Life Matters continues after this.
Well, now we have a special opportunity for Life Matters listeners wherever you are. You can be on the air. That's right. If you have a question for Life Matters, we have a special way for you to ask that question. Tell us where you're listening from, speak slowly and clearly, and you can record a message. Go to lifematters.life. That's lifematters.life. Scroll to the bottom of the page, and there you'll see Send a Message to Brian Johnston. Using your computer's microphone, you can record a message, and it'll record clearly. You can't go longer than 90 seconds, but please feel free if you have a question or a comment. Make sure you keep it polite. We do have to edit, and we can't put impolite stuff on the air, but we do want to hear from you. That's lifematters.life. Scroll to the bottom of the page and give us your thoughts.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Well, welcome back to Life Matters. We're talking about natural law, the laws of nature, and of nature's God is what it says in America's founding documents. That was the basis on which they decided to create a new nation, conceived in liberty, as Lincoln would say later. and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That's a principle of natural law. Man's laws fail. Man tends to group people. Man's laws tend to come up short when it comes to justice. So I'm going to read right now from a letter from Martin Luther King, which he wrote in the Birmingham jail, Birmingham, Alabama. Here we go. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. One has not only a legal, but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that, quote, an unjust law is no law at all, close quote. So that is Martin Luther King from his letter from Birmingham jail. I'm going to continue now, though. This is important. Now, again, Martin Luther King. Now, what is the difference between the two, just and unjust laws? How does one determine whether a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with this moral law. To put it in the terms of St. Thomas Aquinas, an unjust law is a human law that is not rooted in eternal law and natural law. Any law that uplifts human persons is just. Any law that degrades human persons is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. It gives the segregator a false sense of superiority and the segregated a false sense of inferiority. Segregation, to use the terminology of the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, substitutes an I-it relationship for an I-thou relationship and ends up relegating persons to the status of things. That's Martin Luther King, letter from Birmingham jail. He's addressing unjust laws, and in particular, the unjust laws of segregation. He's using a natural law argument that unjust laws are laws created by men to their own opinions, and they're not lining them up with objective facts that are outside of themselves. And that's what natural law does. Natural law, he quoted there from Thomas Aquinas. He quoted also from Augustine. We're going to talk about those older quotes. There's many others who said nature points out God's principles. And if you want to make principles, that's what laws are, principles for your society. If you want just principles, then you need to follow as closely as possible God's principles. And he's revealed them in nature. We're going to end our discussion with a lot of time in the scriptures because I have found there's quite a few Christians that will nod in agreement, but still don't fully understand the fullness of what natural law is and how to apply it, how to explain what God's revealed in nature. And that's part of your job as a Christian, is to be an ambassador and to help others who've been taken captive in the futility of their mind with funny ideas about what law should be, to help them unwind the confusion in their mind by which they've been taken captive to do the will of the devil. And I have to tell you, killing human babies or euthanizing grandma, that's not God's will for sure. And it's actually intentionally killing another human being, And that's what Martin Luther King said, is that when we objectify other people, we no longer value them as human beings. Okay, that being said, I want to explain more deeply what Martin Luther King is not saying. Martin Luther King is not invoking man's teachings and principles. He's not invoking sociology. Sociology tends to view human life and culture as groups battling groups. And sociology is directly descended from a progressive worldview. We've talked about that at other times. And by progressivism, we're talking about the notion that mankind has a destiny and we're progressing somewhere and there's a great struggle and that we need to join into that struggle for what's really good. But what's really good tends to be rather vague and it changes from day to day according to the culture that wants to progress in what direction they're calling progress. And that's very different from natural law. So as we talk about natural law, we're asserting this as a definitive guidepost for what is true and just. As Martin Luther King said, that's the only way you can have justice, is by following the principles revealed in nature by the Maker. And if you do that, your chances of having just laws leap up. If instead, and this is the case with a lot of people dealing with segregation, by the way, is they're actually relativists. And I happen to know a religious leader. He's a friend of mine. He is a bishop. I won't tell you of which denomination, but he's also immersed in sociology. And that's his training. He has advanced degrees in sociology. And he's made a point that he is going to help the oppressed because it's unjust that they're oppressed. But his predicate is not natural law. The predicate in sociology is that mankind is struggling group against group, and that there's an oppressed group, and our job is to help the oppressed and lift them up, and the oppressors must be brought low. It's part of the struggle of mankind, which Hegel described and which Marx more accurately gives action to. He wants there to continue to be a struggle by having the good guys on top. And by good, it's whatever your opinion and your feeling about injustice is. Those are the good guys, and we're rooting for those. And those bad oppressors, our job is to keep them down. That's sociology. It's groupthink. That is not what Martin Luther King believed. He was very clear. Martin Luther King said, I look forward to the day where my children are judged not by what group they're in, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So justice has to do with individual lives. And again, you and I know this. You and I know that each individual life is unique, as we said, endowed by their Creator. If you're a Christian, you know that we're made in the image and likeness of God. So individual accountability and individual actions and the protection of individual lives is the predicate of natural law. It is not group against group. It's not this group struggle. We're going to spend more time on another program talking about the errors of progressivism and why it's at war with natural law, why the progressive ideology is people's opinions and their feelings about injustice and something's got to be done. And I'm not knocking that. I'm saying, as I started out saying, that opinions and feelings are not the basis for sound laws. They're not the basis for truth. They're the basis for our feelings. And sometimes we need to dig deeper. And that's what just law does, and those who pursue just laws. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Life Matters.
Are you willing to step up to be a lifeguard? We're asking you to consider becoming a Life Matters lifeguard. On Life Matters, we cut to the depths of this cultural battle of ideas that has robbed America of its core values and robbed the innocent of their right to life. Anything you can pledge is appreciated. But if you pledge $19 a month, we will make you part of the Life Matters lifeguard team, getting you the important tools and dynamic information to help save lives and encourage others in understanding the lurking dangers in today's deadly cross-currents of culture. Your pledge helps us with our costs of broadcast. It keeps the full understanding of the right to life going out over our numerous radio stations and also facilitates the important podcast that carries even more programming. Please go to the front page of the Life Matters website and click on the donate button. Your donation is deeply appreciated.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
We're back, and you're listening to Life Matters. I mentioned earlier that a friend of mine now from Egypt, Hani, and Hani is actually from Egypt, but lived most of his life in the UK, in England, if you will. His English is better than mine, better than yours. I had a great visit with him. We spoke for a couple of hours, but for about a half an hour, he wanted to know what I meant by the right to life. Well, he was asking the right guy, wasn't he? So I explained to him that it wasn't about religion. I explained to him that that's not what we're trying to do when we're trying to assert that abortion is a bad thing. We're not saying it's because of our religion. And he understood very clearly when I said it's as in Egypt, there are those who would seek to superimpose their religion into the law. that the Muslim Brotherhood, if you're aware of this, the Muslim Brotherhood had a revolution and took over the Egyptian lawmaking process, and the Egyptian people had to throw them out. Unfortunately, they were empowered. If you go back in your history, this was during the Obama administration. Barack Obama actually celebrated and rewarded the Egyptian Brotherhood when they took power in Egypt. But Handy understood what I was saying is that as you make laws, you can't do it merely as a Coptic Christian, which is the Christian sect dominant of Christianity in Egypt, or as a Muslim and seek to put Sharia law into civil law, because now you are demanding that your religion be the standard. But there's a higher standard. What is that higher standard? How do we find out? And that's where the principles of natural law come in. There's self-evident truth. So I got a chance to share with Hanny about the fact that nature reveals what's true. And that's the predicate for science. Many of you who listen to Life Matters know that we're great fans of science, that you need to look at what is objectively known. Much of what's called scientific today isn't. It's people's conjecture about the conclusions they want, and then they'll call it science. I've had on this program the founder of Greenpeace, the only scientist at the founding of Greenpeace, and that's Dr. Patrick Moore. And if anybody knows environmentalism and the science of it, he does. He left Greenpeace. He's publicly stated that Greenpeace lies about science, that they're lying about global warming, that they defy him when he explains the facts. They don't want to hear it. And they say, no, we want this conclusion. He had to leave Greenpeace. Look him up, Dr. Patrick Moore. Real science is willing to come to conclusions that maybe they didn't have in mind at first. Because facts are terrible things, and they're terrible things to waste. So we're entitled to our opinions, but we're not entitled to our own facts. As I spoke with Hanny about it, and particularly that analogy in Egypt, because he was living now in a freer Egypt where he could vote, where the values of freedom that were represented in England, in the UK, could be echoed. And he understood very clearly. And I was honored. He said, hey, that makes so much sense. Because I had to show him that presenting our religion as the basis for making laws is very, very dangerous. And that's not what we're doing in the Right to Life movement. And if you are doing that, I want you to rethink it. The reason I mention that is I have a lot of friends that talk about voting biblically. And while it's true, it's if you understand the deeper message of the Bible. And I want to tell you it's a true story. A true thing happened in 1990. I was in a situation where certain pro-life folks said, no, we're going to make laws biblically, and we're going to follow that. So we have to have laws. We have to execute abortionists. We'll talk about that another time. We've spoken about what kind of laws we're seeking. But these were particular folks. They got a lot of attention. And I won't use names right now, but I'll tell you if you want to go to World Magazine of January 27th, 1990, that issue, it goes into it deeply. But I was in a circumstance where these people were leading pro-lifers and telling pro-lifers this is what they had to do. We have to put the Bible into our laws. And thankfully, they went too far because one of the points they said was that we need to make sure that rebellious teens are dealt with properly. And in the Bible, it says you stone a child that talks back to you. You literally publicly stone them. And that is in the Old Testament, by the way. And the plan is, well, you just do it once and kids aren't going to talk back again. Unfortunately, that is not the kind of laws that we're going to pass. That's not what voting biblically means. And so I'm going to challenge you now, my Christian friends, that voting biblically means looking at the principles that are in the Bible. And the principles in the Bible point to nature, that God has already revealed himself to the consciences of others. Here's Romans 1, Romans 1:20. For his invisible attributes, namely the eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Here's Romans 2:14 and 15. For when Gentiles who do not have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts either accuse or excuse them. So here Paul is writing, we presume it was Paul that wrote the book of Romans, but all Christians receive the book of Romans, whatever your denomination is. And here he's explaining that God has revealed this in nature. But it's throughout the scriptures. If you really want to look at the scriptures, God specifically directs us to look to nature. In the Old Testament, the Psalms, when I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers. Doesn't say when you look up and glance at stars, oh yeah, there's some stars. When I consider deeply. Jesus, when he taught, he has some great sayings, Sermons on the Mount. Behold the lilies of the field, they do not sow or reap. Now, a lot of people know that, but Jesus actually is telling you to do it. Look at them. Consider them. We're actually told in the scriptures to look at what God has made, to learn and to ask of him. We're supposed to be asking God in our hearts, in our conscience, what is it, Lord, that you want to say to me? What is true? That's what true scientists are supposed to do, by the way. I think one of the finest scientists America's ever produced is an incredible man, and that's George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was a Christian gentleman and a scientist. Many people think he invented peanut butter. He didn't. But he did consider the peanut, and he did state specifically he found 105 different ways of using it. He helped plant the South. The peanut actually puts nitrogen into the soil. Cotton had actually depleted the soil of the South. He himself had been a slave. He helped revive the South. He taught at Tuskegee. Let me give you a couple of his quotes. This is Carver. I like to think of nature as an unlimited broadcasting station through which God appeals to us every hour if we will only listen. He's saying what Paul said. God is speaking to us in nature, but you have to consider it deeply and set aside your opinions. Something else that he did is he would continually test and continually test and continually test. And there are other good scientists that do that. They keep going. They don't jump to conclusions. Here's another great quote. God is going to reveal to us things he never revealed before we put our hands in his. No books ever go into my laboratory. The thing I am to do in the way of doing it are revealed to me. I never have to grope for methods. The method is revealed to me the moment I am inspired to create something new. Without God, to draw aside the curtain, I would be helpless. God uses nature. Nature itself is the showing of God, that he's there, and the invitation of God to come and consider his ways. Peter said in 2 Peter that we need to add to our faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge. We need to apply ourselves to understand these deeper things. In the Right to Life, we talk about the fact that the facts are on our side. So don't present the right to life as your opinion or your theology. Present the facts. The facts are on our side, and facts are terrible things to waste.
Learn more about everything in today's show online at lifematters.life, where you'll find all the resources you need to protect life. Life Matters is a production of the California Pro-Life Council, the state affiliate of National Right to Life. Wherever you are in the nation, you can find out more at National Right to Life. You can find vital pro-life information and also find the access to your state and local Right to Life affiliate. Get informed and get involved.